everybody. Hi there. Can you hear me? Yeah? Is this working? I don't know. I feel like I'm in a weird spot where I can't tell if it's on. Can people in the back, can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, thank you, people in the back. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Machine Learning and UX. Also, oh my gosh, this space is beautiful. Thank you so much, Salesforce. Can we give them a round of applause? We are so excited to host an event here. We did an awesome event almost exactly 1 year ago, last April, which was super well attended, and we are so excited to be back specifically too on this awesome, speaking to this awesome team about how they use data science techniques on their user experience team. But I thought I might just start with some of you. How many of you, this is your first machine learning UX? Oh, about like half. That's awesome. Welcome. And for all of you who are returning, hello, welcome back. Nice to see you. Let's see. I think look, this is what I have to work with is this weird futuristic remote. So is this going to detonate a bomb? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm going to just use the keyboard, old fashioned. Welcome to this awesome talk. Our second one of third? I forget. Second of 2019. Second one back at Salesforce. Also, first one in the Salesforce Tower. How many of you, this is your first time here too? Woo! I know, it's so nice. Awesome. So a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'm first going to give a little bit of welcome for those of you who are new to our group. Then we're going to turn it over to Salesforce. They're going to give us a little a technical talk about how they actually use data-driven personas on their team, how they construct them, what they actually do with them. Then I have a little bit of time for Q&A, and we're going to be doing Q&A through our Twitter. So if you want to follow us or get ready to tweet questions too, it's at MLUXSF. And then we'll have some more time for social hour afterwards, meeting some awesome Salesforce people. So a little bit about us. I know that I'm the only one standing up here, but this would not be possible without all of my leadership committee. So if you're on the leadership team, can you raise your hand? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, a lot of you guys are in the back and clapping quietly and not raising your hand. But thank you all so much to those of you who make this possible. Really appreciate it, especially our volunteers as well. Back. Just a little bit about me and why I organize this. I actually focus in data science and user experience. I work full-time at Amazon Music. My background's in computational neuroscience, but I work now on a design team. So I care a lot about this. I think it's really interesting. And I'm actively looking for cool, new, innovative ways to use these emerging technologies. Always excited for cool case studies. So that's why I was so stoked to work with the Salesforce team to put on this event, because they're doing some really cool stuff that's not only new and innovative, but also documenting it and sharing it out widely so we could all take it back to our teams after, which I just think is so cool. This is a fellowship project run through the Center for Technology, Society, and Policy, as well as the Algorithmic Fairness and Opacity Working Group. I know, big names. But they do a bunch of really cool stuff. There's a ton of other really great projects over from UC Berkeley. I would encourage you all to check it out. Or if you're just interested, come say hi. I'm more than happy to share about the other types of projects that they have too. Okay, big thank you to Salesforce. Really big thank you to Katie. Where is Katie? Okay. Well, thank you to Katie, Connie, Tuhina, Lana, Molly, and Emily too, who helped set this up, and the rest of the Salesforce team. Thank you all so much. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Thank you. Yeah, this definitely, I think we had equal number of MLUX volunteers to Salesforce volunteers. So thank you to all the Salesforce volunteers too. So just really quickly, for those of you who might be new here, I know I always start with kind of like, people always ask me, what is machine learning UX? Those are two different job categories. Those don't tend to go together. Well, how I like to explain it is we try to look at how data can inform and drive UX design decisions, but also how can we use UX to help collect data for future models that might not even exist yet? Do we design ways to make what our models do more transparent to our users? How do we design cool new interfaces that allow people to adapt to machine learning itself? And that leads to really cool, and when I say UX, it's not just visual design for all the folks in the room who might be coming from machine learning. UX is a ton of different techniques, from UX research, like qualitative, to interaction design, all that stuff, really thinking about the experience of the product. And I'm simplifying data here, but that could be like AI, machine learning, data science, statistical inference, all these types of techniques. And that allows us to make really cool products like the ones you see up here. So one of my favorites is, of course, the Pinterest visual search, where you can receive the search as you go through, or like the GIF generator from your auto text and stuff too, that's doing quick NLP on what you're typing and able to then suggest GIFs for you to send, and Google Quick Draw, Auto Draw. So those are the types of things that the future of MLUX has. Yes, and so when we created this group, our vision is to create a collaborative environment between UX, data science, and everyone in between. And we aim to organize a community that helps foster cooperation, creativity, and learning across these two disciplines in this emerging practice, and just kind of talk about this cool field of human-centered machine learning. Let's share ideas and resources. So we're really stoked to have a cool technical talk today to share kind of this practice too. So we do mostly technical talks, followed by Q&A or panels. Really focus on sharing best practices. I really hope that everyone in the room today takes away like one key thing that they can go to their stand-up tomorrow morning and like share with their team about like, hey, we should be looking into X or something. So like that's my goal for organizing this too. I really hope that this helps inform your practice. And we also do semi-regular networking and happy hours, which is what we're doing in April, spoiler alert. But so we've been lucky to partner with a bunch of really, really great groups the last year plus that we've been doing this. So thank you to all of our past sponsors. And you can find us on meetup.com. I think that's probably the best way to find us. But we also exist. We have a standalone website where you can sign up for our MailChimp. So that will be how you get our exclusive tickets. Oh. Okay, sure. I will talk about all of our cool resources. So did you know that we have a website where you can sign up for our exclusive tickets? So we have a MailChimp listserv, and that's where we're going to be posting all of our Eventbrite tickets, and we'll post them in advance too. But we email that out to the listserv specifically, so make sure you sign up for that listserv. And we also have a Twitter, so that's MLUXSF, if you want to go follow it, and if you have questions throughout the talk and you want to tweet at it. And then lastly, we also have a YouTube channel. So we are recording this tonight, if you couldn't tell. So for all the folks who are watching later, hello, welcome from the past. And we will post this too if you want to share this out to your teams and everything. We do try to record these because we do recognize that like there's a lot that happens in them, so you might want to watch it later too. And also share it out to your team. Cool. And our website has some of our past talks as well, and past like key findings and stuff too. So we have up there Tony Chu, product designer over at Noodle AI, talking about how to do product design for AI platforms. We have a bunch of really, really cool talks there. Our panel that we just did at IDEO last summer on designing using data science ethically, we also have that posted as well, and that's up on our YouTube channel too. We have like Elizabeth Churchill from Google, Stuart Geiger from UC Berkeley Bids, and are we good? Cool. Let me tell you more about all the past events that we've done. Cool. By being here, you're agreeing to our code of conduct. That's also on our website. Oh no, my clicker's not working. Okay. Do you want to manually click it? Oops, too far. Back one. Awesome. And the last thing that I kind of want to say before I turn it over to our wonderful guest speakers is we cannot happen, MLUX SF cannot happen without you. So if you're a UX designer working on machine learning products, if you're a data scientist trying to solve problems around user experience, if you do research around machine learning interfaces, if you blend ML, AI, data science seamlessly into your user experience, we want to hear from you. Hi, I'm super approachable. Come to me. Oh. Is the microphone set up? I want to hear about the types of stuff that you're working on. We would love to host an event to really share out these practices with you too. That's kind of how I found our speakers today, is because they posted on Medium, and I was like, this is awesome. Let's totally do a talk on this. Of course, we're always looking for sponsors and venues as well. If your company might not have a speaker who wants to talk, we would love to work with you too, because we do have some speakers who just are looking for places to sponsor us. We also would love it if you do want to give a talk. We also would love it if you want to volunteer with us. It's very fun, right, volunteers? Hi. We get to hang out beforehand and greet all of you, and it's great. And if you want to be our videographer, some of our venues don't have wonderful AV people. Thank you. We would love to get you involved. Just email me, or you can email all of us at humans@MLUXSF.com. It's funny, right? Because we're the human side of the machine learning. Yeah, it's hilarious. You're welcome. Cool. All right. Okay. So really quickly, we're going to do an icebreaker because the big reason why we're here is to meet other people who do cool stuff in the field. So if you could turn to the person next to you really quick, name, favorite ML product, meet someone cool. Yeah? 2 minutes.
You want to turn your mic off?
Yeah. All right. Hi, y'all. Hey. Don't mean to interrupt your conversation. I know you guys just made a new best friend. Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm so glad that you guys got to meet someone cool. Did you meet a cool new person? Yeah? Yeah? Someone who you can go grab coffee with after this and chat more about MLUX? Why not? T, sorry. Okay, well, really happy that all of y'all got to meet someone. That's a big part of why I love bringing people together. I really hope that you can form a connection with someone afterwards, and hopefully you hang around too for social hour and chat with some really cool folks. But speaking of other really cool folks, I want to introduce Nalini, who's going to introduce our Welcome to Salesforce, as well as our wonderful guest speakers. So thank you so much, Nalini.
Hi, everyone. So I checked many of you in at the front desk earlier today. I'm going to be super brief. I just wanted to welcome you on the behalf of Salesforce. I'm a leader in the user experience team here, and I lead the insights and analytics team. And I'm super thrilled that you're here and that we're engaging in this kind of topic. I'm thrilled that also you recognize that this is sort of an interesting topic to come to in the first place. So without much further ado, I'm going to introduce two people on my team, Connie and Tuhina, and they're going to share with you about data-driven personas. Yes, round of applause for them.
I think you keep that. We're already mic'd. We need your thumbprint. Thanks. Excellent. Does that work? Yes. So welcome. We're really excited to share our work with personas with everybody. So thank you so much for coming. I'm Connie. I'm a user researcher here at Salesforce. And a little bit about me, my background is in experimental psychology. I did research consulting work, which was primarily quantitative before crossing over into UX, doing some design work, coming home to research. And now my work is still a mix of quant and qual, but I'd say it's probably more qual at this point. But I consider myself a mixed methods researcher.
And I'm Tuhina. I'm a research analyst on the UX analytics team here at Salesforce. I'm also a recent graduate from the University of Texas at Austin, where I studied math and statistics. So like I said, I'm on the analytics team, so we're kind of like a quantitative branch of our user research team here. And so my role is kind of at the intersection of user research and statistics and data, which is why I worked on our data-driven personas.
So before we start, we want to acknowledge that this project had a big team behind it. So thank you to all of the researchers who worked on this project team. So all the people up here were people who were from our research team, contributed to the project. Yuting and I co-led the project with a lot of support and guidance from Rebecca. Tuhina did our statistical analysis, and Nalini, Anjali, Alyssa, and Azalea all provided a ton of help and guidance and support and feedback throughout. So shout out to our team.
Okay, so what are personas? I'd love to start by getting a show of hands for how many of you know what personas are or what they're used for. Okay, nice. And how many of you have actually worked on like creating or developing them at your organizations? Awesome, okay. So we will probably breeze through this section then, because most of you know what personas are. But, we're scrolling this backwards. Okay, so personas are obviously super common in UX. Most of you know what they are, but their methods and application are actually super debated. If you've worked with personas before, you know that there are many schools of thought on how they're used and how they should be created. So before we begin, we just want to level set on what personas are and how we use them here at Salesforce. So at Salesforce, personas help us answer the question, the big question, how do you know what to build for your users? We always want to be aware and checking ourselves on how well we know our users. So how do they use our products? What devices are they using our product on? And what delights and frustrates them? Things like that. So personas are the answer to all of those questions. They help us create a shared understanding of our users and a common language for describing them. And of course, their purpose is to align our goals as folks in UX with the goals of people who are actually using our products. Okay, so there's a difference between personas and effective personas. So effective personas are data-driven, which will ensure that they're actually representative of your population and the people who are using products. They're digestible, so they should be easy to understand. They should be adoptable, so people should be able to talk about them and use them. They should be actionable, so you should actually be able to make design decisions based on them. And they need to be dynamic. So at Salesforce, our user base is ever-changing, so we need personas that are going to be able to keep up with that pace. Okay.
So we want to share one of our recent persona projects with you. So I'm going to start by giving you some background. You're all here in the Salesforce Tower, and I bet some of you are wondering, what is Salesforce? And so Salesforce is an enterprise platform that our customers use to connect them with their employees, customers, and partners, and it's really across every possible touch point. So how this plays out at a company is one of our customers might use Salesforce to help manage their sales process. So their sales team would use it to track their leads and accounts. Salesforce salespeople use it, but all kinds of other people use it as well. We also have call centers who use Salesforce to handle customer complaints. People use it to track and visualize data. You can set up e-commerce websites using Salesforce, create custom apps. So it's really a platform that's being customized for our Salesforce to use, for our customers to use in a lot of different ways. And that means that we have a lot of different types of users. So we have everything from employees that are customers who are using Salesforce to complete their job, to people who don't even know they're using Salesforce, like maybe someone using an app or an e-commerce website. And we have lots of different people who are building and customizing solutions on Salesforce on our platform. So for our project, we focused in on admins and developers. So these are people who are customizing Salesforce and developing solutions on our platform. They might just go about it in different ways. So we have lots of different tools. We call them our declarative tools, which are point-and-click tools that people can use to customize Salesforce and make it relevant to their own business. But you can also do that with code. So you could also write code to customize Salesforce. So these were the focus of our project. And we had two previous sets of personas that we had used in the past. So in the past, we had thought of people who don't know how to code, but those were our admins, and we had a set of admin personas. And we thought of people who do code as our developers, and we had a set of developer personas. But those were done in 2014 and 2016. So a lot of things had happened since those original personas were developed. We had launched Trailhead, which is our online learning platform to help people level up their skills with Salesforce. We had launched a whole new modernized version of Salesforce, which is Lightning. We'd also acquired a bunch of companies. A few of them are here, which means that all of their users were now coming into the Salesforce ecosystem, and our user base is diversifying, but the way we thought about our users really hadn't changed. We also started hearing from our stakeholders. There were some questions, right? So they were starting to think, you know, what are admins and developers' jobs? Like, what are they really responsible for, both in and outside of the product? Is there any overlap between admins and developers? Do they differ depending on what products they use? What about people who work on teams versus people who work alone? Are those different types of admins and developers? So we started to get the signal that maybe our personas needed to be refreshed. We were getting some questions, and we were starting to think it was time to go back and revisit these original personas. So our goal was to create personas that represented that full spectrum of people who provision, configure, customize, and develop solutions in our ecosystem. So for the first time, we put admins and developers together in one project. And our hope there was to see if there was any overlap between admins and developers. We also wanted to consider that full Salesforce ecosystem. So like I said, we've acquired a bunch of companies, and we wanted to put them all together because no matter which product they use, we wanted to have that shared language to talk about them. So the way we approached this project, this kind of gives you an overview. We started with some qualitative work, and then we went into survey development, and then we launched our survey and did a bunch of analysis. And I'm going to walk through this with you. So the first thing we did is we started with our stakeholders. We wanted to understand what was important to them, what were their questions, how do they use the current personas, you know, are they working for them, what research questions do they have, and we used all of this information to shape our qualitative work with actual admins and developers. So our next step was we did qualitative interviews. We did about 30 interviews with admins and developers where we talked about all about their jobs. So what do you do? What are you responsible for? Who do you work with? How do you divide up your work? How did you even get into Salesforce? What do you want to do next? So we really dived deep with these people and heard all about their jobs. And we used those learnings to inform what we wanted to measure in our survey. So we called these our dimensions. So we looked for things that really seemed to define our admins and developers. So what differentiated them from each other? And those were the things that we wanted to put into our survey. So these are the dimensions that we uncovered in our qualitative work that we thought might differentiate admins and developers. So responsibilities, including what kind of tasks do they do, how much time do they spend on each one, the extent of their domain, are they more tactical or more strategic? We're really interested in who do you work with and how do you go about that? How do you divide up work? How autonomous are you? Do you have any decision-making power? Also skills, both with Salesforce as well as programming languages and development work in general. And then guiding principles, so sort of the philosophical stuff, like what do you consider when you're developing something? What is your philosophy towards customization? Do you like to start from scratch, or do you want to take a standardized solution and kind of tweak it? So we took all of these dimensions and we put them into a survey. And the survey had a ton of rounds of internal feedback. So we had about 80 internal stakeholders on this project, and so we really needed their help. These were our internal experts. So we needed to know what language should we use? How do we talk about these things? What questions make sense to people? And they gave us a lot of help refining the survey. Having 80 stakeholders, they also had a lot of ideas about what should be in the survey. So you can probably imagine that we had way too many questions and we had to do a ton of cutting. We were really ruthless about, is this a persona question or is this a really interesting question that should be answered in another research project at another time? So this phase was all about prioritizing and negotiating with all of those stakeholders about what was really important and what should be in that survey. So our next step was we did 2 rounds of pilot testing. So what we would do is we would do a remote interview with an admin or developer. We'd have them take the survey and do a think aloud as they were going. And so this helped us look at the flow of the survey. Did it make sense? And then we were also able to see how are they interpreting these questions? Is that what we were intending, or are they interpreting it in a totally different way? So we did multiple rounds of this. We paused after each one, talked about our learnings, made some tweaks, piloted some more. And this was super important. So we wanted to make sure our survey was valid, that we were actually measuring what we thought we were measuring. And finally, it was ready to launch the survey. So we invited over 800,000 people to participate in the survey, and we got completed responses from just over 6,200. So really exciting. And I'll pass off to Tuhina to talk about analysis.
Okay. So like Connie mentioned, in the past, we have had our admin personas. And so they're listed up here. You can see them. They existed on a single dimension spectrum of skill level in Salesforce, basically. So you can see them there, accidental through accelerated admins. We basically took all of our participants and split them up based on how skilled they are within Salesforce. But with this new project, we really wanted to have a refresh where our personas would be multidimensional. So they would take into account skill level, like the old ones, but they would also take into account how people spent their time, their level of influence, their level of autonomy, their experience with their tools, who they collaborate with, a ton of different variables. So naturally, this required a lot more advanced statistical analysis than we did in the past. So we tested out a variety of different statistical methods before we chose the one that we ended up going with. So first we considered k-means clustering, which is basically where participants would cluster around a certain centroid, and you'd have to have a big amount of centroids in mind already. So we tried different methods to determine the number of groups, but we didn't really know much about our participants. We didn't want to have any assumptions ahead of time, so we ended up not going with k-means clustering. And then we also considered hierarchical clustering, which is basically where groups kind of like roll up into each other like a tree diagram. But again, we didn't know how groups would be contained within one another, and this was just a big assumption that we didn't want to make. So we ended up deciding to go with a principal component analysis. So for us, this was a super exploratory method. It gave us a lot of room to play with the variables. Okay, so what is a PCA? A PCA is basically a statistical method where groups of variables that are influenced by the same component emerge in distinct clusters. So I will go into more detail on that in a couple slides, but just as an overview, after we made these distinct clusters, we ended up assigning participants, each one to a cluster that they best belong to. And then of course, with any statistical test, there are assumptions that must be met. So those are listed here, but just make sure that you're meeting those assumptions before you go forward with a statistical analysis. Okay, so this is the first half of the output that you would see if you were doing a PCA in SPSS, which is the tool that we use. The main thing to focus on here are the 7 components that are significant. And if you look at the last column in this chart, you can see that those 7 components together account for 65% of variation in the data, which is a really good, comfortable number for us. And then that's just a scree plot, which basically graphs the eigenvalues of components, so you can see whether or not they're significant. Okay, so this is the second half of the output that comes from SPSS. This is our rotated component matrix. The data is blurred, obviously, but as you can see, the 7 significant components that I mentioned earlier are listed across the top, And then the variables that are in our model are listed down on the left. So each of the cell values that are blurred out represent how well correlated a certain variable is to its component. And I've color-coded them in Excel, so you can see the darker cells are more highly correlated to their component. So just to ground this, I'll give an example. If you look at component 7 on the far right, you can't tell, but the variables that are highly correlated with this component are how much time you spend on managing people and overseeing their work, how much time you spend on defining strategy, what level of influence do you have over your company's strategy for Salesforce, as well as your company's strategy as well as your company's purchase decisions for Salesforce, and what is the amount of autonomy that you have over your own work and how you approach it. So this group of variables was very clear to us that would be our strategic leader group. So we ended up doing that for all 7 of these components, and we uncovered a lot of different variables that define them, and we were able to create a succinct story for each persona. So with all that being said, we still like to say that persona creation is both an art and a science. So we obviously use those statistical methods that I just mentioned to uncover our personas, but we definitely wanted to continue to manually iterate on them to ensure that they were usable and relevant to the people who we were making them for. And the first way we did that is by going through various rounds of pressure testing. So in the example I mentioned with the strategic leaders on a couple slides ago, we ended up running additional descriptives on that group, and we were able to confirm our notions about who they were. We realized that they collaborate at a high level with execs. They identify as VPs and C-levels. So this was able to confirm what we thought about the group. And this is also a really good example, just as a side note, of why it's important to include variables in your survey that you're curious about, even if they're not going to be included in your model, because you need something to test your model against, and you need variables to confirm what you think about your groups. So the second way that we sort of incorporated both art and science into our personas was that we were in a constant feedback loop with our stakeholders. So the stats techniques that I mentioned created the framework for our personas, but we were constantly meeting with stakeholders along the way. We were sharing our findings, getting their feedback, making minor changes as well as major changes. And our goal was, like I said, to create personas that were usable. So this was really important. And then finally, the last way we combined both art and science is that after our PCA gave us our groups, we manually iterated on them so that they would make more sense for our use case. So as the first example of this is, as we were assigning people to their persona groups, we realized that there was this sort of mid-sized group of people who the PCA assigned to groups, but they didn't fit that well in with them. They were they weren't super skilled, they weren't super engaged with Salesforce. So we thought instead of just throwing them into groups where they kind of fit, we pulled them out manually and put them together into one group and decided to learn something from them. We ended up calling them our emerging admins, so they're sort of like a high potential group. And the second way that we sort of iterated manually on our personas is with our builder group. So our builders emerged and were defined as people who spend a lot of time customizing in Salesforce. But they represented almost 50% of our sample size, and we recognized that that wasn't nuanced enough to be valuable for people who are going to be using these personas. So we ended up breaking them out based on their skill level, which is something that we took inspiration from our first persona set that I showed earlier. So we ended up with basic through developer builders, and these personas felt nuanced enough to actually be valuable.
All right, so we had our personas, and then it was just a matter of getting people to use them. So one of the things that really helped our adoption of the personas was including our stakeholders throughout the project. So I know I mentioned it, Tuhina mentioned it, we had a lot of stakeholder involvement, and that really helped us to build buy-in throughout the whole process. Next, we created a project-specific brand, and we created a bunch of different deliverables. So we worked with a visual designer to create icons, a color scheme, deck templates, all of these materials that would kind of show together, like, this is the admin and developer personas. This is a cohesive project. So for example, we created a quick snapshot for each persona. So this is an example of one of them. It included the name, the icon, a quick description, and some data. So as you can imagine, we had a lot of data to choose from. And so we had to think really hard about what data do we show for every single persona and what data lives in the appendix. So we decided to highlight the tasks, so the day in the life, what do these people do all day, their skill level with or their experience level with Salesforce, and then also the platforms and products that they use at Salesforce. So we thought that was pretty universal, and that's what we highlighted on each snapshot. We also created a dashboard, and that allowed our internal stakeholders to dive into the data on their own. So they could go in and sort and filter and check out the data in a way that was more meaningful to them. And that also meant we weren't asked to do that for them. And we created a variety of different persona assets. So our larger research team has personas for each product area, and we create a deck of cards that has all of those personas together. So we updated our card designs, adding our new personas, make it part of the family. And we also have an internal website where people can go and download all of our latest assets and details for each persona. So having all of this in place was really important. We also launched what we called our roadshow. And so this was all about getting out there and getting people to understand the personas and getting them excited about it. So the first thing we did in the roadshow was we did a drip campaign. So we sent a series of messages and emails where we kind of unveiled the findings a little bit at a time. So we'd say, oh, we found this, and then we were getting people excited, and they were curious, and they were really excited to learn about the personas when they were ready to be unveiled. The other thing we did is we had a big unveiling for our entire tech and product organization. So we invited them all at once, we did a big presentation and unveiled all of our resources at once. And then finally, we've done a series of follow-up meetings with individual groups where we've personalized the presentation to what's most relevant to them, and we've presented it to individual teams. So in case you're wondering, our project was a huge success. People were really excited to learn about our personas, and we've seen a lot of people using them and talking about them, incorporating them into their own work and their process. We're seeing our deliverables being kind of added to other people's decks. It's really exciting, and we've learned a lot through this whole process. So we wanted to reflect and share some of our lessons learned. The first one is to involve stakeholders early and often. So like I said, we had over 80 internal stakeholders, and we worked with 8 teams internally. And that's a lot of people. And it's really hard and really challenging to include that many people in a project like this. It also slows down your project. If you have to stop and pause and get feedback and socialize with that many people, it kind of slows things down, and it's really challenging. But it's completely worth it, because by the time we released the personas, we had a lot of buy-in. We had a lot of people who understood how much consideration and thoughtfulness went into all of the choices and all of the trade-offs we made in the project. And those people became our internal advocates. They were telling other people, have you seen the new personas? And they were really helpful in getting people to use them and getting people excited about them. The other benefit about including your stakeholders is that you can kind of get a sense of their assumptions. So as you're meeting with your stakeholders, pay really close attention to all the clues they're giving you. Like, what do they think is true? What are their questions? What are their pet things that they always bring up? So you want to flag those assumptions that your stakeholders have. And one thing you can do is include questions in your survey that measure those assumptions, and you can go back and test those in the analysis phase. So for example, one of our assumptions that we heard from people was that company size was everything, that people at small companies were very different than people at big companies. And so we had a question like that in our survey, and we could go back, like Tuhina said, when we were doing pressure testing, we were getting questions, and we could go back, we could predict they were going to ask that question, and we had an answer backed up by data, and we could tell them if that was or wasn't important. So having all of these assumptions and testing them allowed us to kind of bust some of those internal myths that people have, and feel really prepared to deal with all of those questions from our stakeholders.
Okay, so our next big lesson learned was around designing your survey for effective analysis. So Connie and Tuhina, who's another person who was working on the project, created our persona survey in like spring or summer of 2018. At the time I was still in college, and I hadn't joined Salesforce yet. So when I started working at the company in August of that year, I inherited a lot of the decisions that were already made before I arrived in terms of analysis. And so something to keep in mind when you're writing your survey, if possible, which it wasn't possible in our case, but if possible, to loop in the people who are going to be doing your analysis early on and involve them in the survey writing process. So, you know, hopefully they can give their feedback on the question design and the data format and the sample size and who you're sending the survey to and things like that. It'll just make the transition from a ton of data to actual insights a lot smoother. Oh, and then some of the like data specific takeaways in terms of what I just said about, you know, looping in people who are going to be doing the analysis. Some things to keep in mind. Definitely avoid binary data if possible in terms of writing your survey. There's not much you can do creatively with analysis for a yes or no question. So if you are curious about whether or not your users do a certain task, consider reframing the question, to what degree do you do this task, or how often do you do this task? You'll just have a lot more rich information from it. The second takeaway is keep your continuous data on a consistent scale. I would assume that for most persona projects, you would be doing some form of correlation in your analysis. So if your scale is 1 to 5 on one question, try to keep it the same for all your questions, just so that you can save yourself time in the data cleanup process, and you can keep all your correlations 1 to 1. Also try to keep them in the same direction, so 5 is always the most and 1 is always the least. Also learned in the data cleanup process. And then avoid undefined scales if possible. So a question like rank your preferences from top to bottom, you don't know what the space is between the top choice and the second choice and the second choice and the third choice. So it's just not a consistent variable with all the other variables you'll be using. And especially in this case, when you're putting a ton of data into SPSS and you're hoping it'll give you personas. So you want everything to be on a consistent scale. And then definitively the least exciting part about making personas is formatting your data, but it is really important. So the first aspect of that is just documenting all the versions of your data. So when you're trying a ton of different models of a PCA, you want to be able to keep track of, you know, dates and when you were using certain variables and how successful they were, and you want to compare them past and future. And so that's really helpful. Also, make sure you determine what you're going to define as a valid response. So in our case, that was people who answered a certain set of questions. And if they didn't, we removed them in the beginning so that we didn't have to worry about them later on, and it just kept analysis consistent. And then finally, get your data ready for analysis. So just make sure that it's clean and organized and labeled and color-coded if you're into that. And you just want to leave no room for doubt, like after you put your data in your SPSS or whatever software you're using. It's complicated enough when you're working with so many variables. So you just want to make sure that everything is super straightforward and you don't have to be keeping track of like formatting and things like that in the end.
Cool. So our last learning is really how important it is to make a really crisp story out of all of that data that you're collecting. So persona projects generate a lot of data. So at the end of our project, we had over 50 hours of video, 258 variables, multiply that by our 6,200 respondents, and we had over 10,000 open-ended comments to go through in our survey. So as a researcher, this is awesome. We were like, wow, we have so much rich, exciting data. But like normal humans, that seems really overwhelming. This is too much. So even after all of our analysis and synthesis, we ended up with 11 personas, which is still a lot. If you want people to remember the names, the nuances, the description, the data for each one, like that's going to make their head hurt. That's too much information. So what our team did is we focused on impact. So we thought about what can be looked up or learned over time? Like what is something we really want people to remember versus something they can refer back to later? So we decided what takeaways we wanted all of our audiences to have, and we identified 4 key things that no matter who we talked to, that they were going to leave with. And then we conveyed that story in a really memorable way. So we spent a lot of time story mapping our presentations and our deliverables. We used the Duarte storytelling technique. And we thought of how do we make this really memorable and make sure that they leave with those takeaways, and then they can come back to our materials and they can look up all the details later. But if they don't leave with those 4 takeaways, they're never going to come back. So it was really important for us to format all of this for impact. Ultimately, this all led to, again, that really successful project. And we're really happy to share with everybody. So thank you so much for your time.
I don't know first.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all so much. That was so cool, right? Were you guys as stoked about that as I was? I was in the back. By the way, I live tweeted everything, all the major findings. You're welcome as notes. I think we're going to move into a panel. Do you guys want to have a seat?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Cool. A new scene. Hello. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing all of your amazing insights. That looks like a ton of work. And like mad kudos to you all, not only for doing it, but being able to succinctly describe all the steps that you've done and share it with us so that way we can like learn from your practice. So I outlined some things that I want the goals of like why specifically machine learning and UX as a meetup wants to like talk to you about data-driven personas. So our goals for this Q&A session, we have some pre-prepared questions, and then we'll have you guys tweet in your questions too, and I'll read them off of Twitter. But really, it's like to share these tangible best practices back with our teams, understand how data science and UX research can come together to create better tools and assets, which I think you guys did an amazing job of describing, and also just like learn about how data-driven personas work. And like I feel like while clustering, PCA are not new techniques in data science, they're a little bit new for UX research, and that makes them cool and novel and like a cool interdisciplinary tool. So really just thinking about that. So look, it's us. I'm going to put that here for a second. I do have some pre-prepared questions. Whoa, and a lot of Twitter followers all of a sudden now that I put the Twitter up there. So I will ask that if you do have questions, just tweet in at MLUXSF. You can also tag Salesforce at Salesforce UX. So would love to see that too. But we'll be, I'll combine and consolidate some of the questions because it seems like sometimes we get some of the same questions on the Twitter. So just tweet those in and then we'll ask them after. But we do have some pre-prepared questions. So Salesforce is a big cloud company with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of data. Why did you use self-reported survey data rather than like behavioral or telemetry data? Like you sent the survey to almost 1 million people. Like, why did you go with that?
I think it really has to do with what our research questions were. So we were interested in what do people do in Salesforce, but also what do they do outside of Salesforce. So if we would have gone with behavioral data or telemetry data, we would have missed a lot of the things that ended up being really important and really defining our admins and developers. So understanding who do you collaborate with? How do you divide up your work? Maybe you don't use Salesforce very often, but you help define the strategy for how people use Salesforce. So we wouldn't have been able to capture any of that using that behavioral data. So survey helped us answer our research questions most effectively.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you combine it at all with any of the telemetry data, or was it only behavioral self-reported?
We did not combine it. Privacy is a very big thing at Salesforce, and so combining data is a dream, but not a reality at Salesforce.
That's awesome. Also to hear, it's great to hear that privacy is a value that you guys have. Okay, so one thing that is unique about your team is that you two are clearly awesome mixed method, like rock stars. Like, are all the people on your team qualitative and quantitative? And also, like, how much did the qualitative actually inform this project? I know you talked a little bit about that too. And really, did you go in with a knowledge a priori of the type of analysis that you wanted to do, or did you really let the data speak for itself?
Yeah, so our team in general, we have all kinds of different researchers on our research team. We have some people who are more qualitative focused, some that are more quant focused, some that are more mixed. For this particular project, the qualitative was really, really important. So because we had those existing personas and we had a framework, if we hadn't have gone out and qualitatively understood, like, what are people's lives all about? What's important to people? We would we probably wouldn't have ended up with the same questions in our survey. So it was really important for us to understand what do we want to measure in our survey before we just jumped into survey development. So I think qualitative work was super important for this project, and it helped ensure that we were answering questions and that we were looking at it in a new, fresh way, rather than just repeating the personas that we already had.
Yeah, and it seems to, the thing that's really interesting to me, I self-identify as a mixed methods researcher too, but the qualitative came in the very beginning and at the very end too. So can you speak a little bit about how the qualitative might have helped inform like what those principal components were too?
Yeah, so in terms of your question about whether the analysis was like mining or sort of determined to begin with, I think that kind of, yeah. So I think it was a little bit of both, but we definitely had an idea of what variables we thought were going to be really influential. And that was definitely informed by the qualitative analysis that we did in the beginning. So we really got like a framework for, what our users cared about. And so we definitely focused in on those variables. And then, of course, we kept an open mind the whole time. And we definitely let our assumptions be affected by, the data that emerged. And that's where like the art and science that I was mentioning earlier kind of comes in. Just that, both need to kind of work in conjunction together.
Yeah, the dimensions that we identified in our qualitative work, we thought of those as kind of our hypotheses. This is what we think might be important or might differentiate our admins and developers. But we didn't know. We went into the statistics with an open mind, and we wanted to know what really is important, what really does define these groups.
Oh, cool. That's so awesome. So with unsupervised learning, it's always a little bit of that art and science, like you were mentioning, of choosing the number of clusters, like for the data scientists in the room, like elbow method. Do you use like root mean squared error? Do you use silhouette coefficient? What do you choose? Like, how did you approach deciding the number of personas you needed? And was that informed by any of the prior research? And did you have clustering, did you have the clustering inform that, or were you more focused on like other types of constraints?
Yeah, so as I said, it was a combination of both. So our PCA emerged the 7 components that I mentioned earlier. But for example, like the first group didn't make sense. The builder group, it was just too big, and it wasn't nuanced enough to make any sense for people to actually use. So we ended up breaking that out further. So yeah, it was definitely a combination of both.
Awesome. And on the topic still of these personas in particular, how often are you guys going to update them? You had mentioned too, like you had made them before. Was it going to be the same 2-year life cycle? Like when are you going to do them again? I know you just finished, but like what's next?
So when we do a massive project like this, our expectation is that we're going to use them for a while, but we also embed it in our product and UX teams. So we keep a kind of our ear to the ground. Like, when are we getting questions? When are these no longer relevant? When is our team not using them? And also, when has a lot of things changed at Salesforce? So maybe our user base or our product has changed dramatically, and that gives us all those signs that it's time for a refresh. So we're hoping these will last and we don't have to do them again this year. But we're always looking for what questions do people have, when has things changed, and we'll update them when needed.
That's awesome. And like it seems like you guys have now done this twice too. Would you want to use the same type of technique again, like the PCA versus like hierarchical or anything like that?
Yeah, I really like the method that we use. I think it's obviously you have to test out a ton of different variables and decide what model you're going to use. But I really like the way it works. I think it was easy for us to create mutually exclusive clusters from it. So we could put participants into one group and say that they were more like other people in that group than they were like anyone else. So yeah, I really like that method, and I think that's something that we would continue to use.
That's awesome. And I know too, you talked about your 80 stakeholders, which like, whoa, that is a lot of stakeholders. But like, how overarching are these personas? Are they used like all across Salesforce? Do they extend just beyond your org? Have you noticed other people, like, it's awesome too that you've created all these amazing assets that people can use, but do you ever have to find yourself coming in being like, that's not how you should interpret that, or like, here, let me help you with that? Yeah.
So our primary audience for the personas are, of course, tech and product, so product managers, designers. But we know with a lot of our persona projects, they really extend beyond our own org. So we had a lot of teams, even as part of our stakeholders, like our marketing team or our admin and developer relations team, people who are really interested in our work and they've used our personas in the past and they've found them really, really helpful in their own work. So we consider them kind of secondary or tertiary audiences. Our first priority is making sure we have something that our product managers and designers is really helpful to them. But yes, they do have a life outside of tech and product at Salesforce.
Yeah. Do you like have a separate like wiki or link on your thing of like, oh, not from these groups here. This is how, like, do you make it easy for other teams to use it? I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, so any team at Salesforce could access it. We have a way to post things internally to the whole company. And we've gotten lots of interest from all over the place. So tons of people find them. They came to our big unveiling. We do see lots of people using them, and that's totally cool with us. We're excited that our work is relevant and helpful to other teams.
That's so cool. And I really love how you guys made such approachable assets too, and that are data driven, but also like really cool data viz. So we do have some, sorry, my phone just keeps on buzzing. We do have some questions coming in. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to try to combine them on the fly. So if I mix up words, please forgive me. There is this question around the pressure testing. What, can you explain a little bit more, like what is this pressure testing? What did you use? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, we tried a bunch of different models of our PCA as well as the other analysis methods that I mentioned earlier. But specifically with our PCA, there were a ton of different combinations of variables that we could use. So just putting some variables in the model and getting an output and seeing that it accounted for a certain amount of variation, like that's a good step, but you need to make sure that the groups that are emerging actually make sense. So we took all of our variables that came from our huge survey and we ran those descriptives from that survey on everyone in each group. So that was our version of pressure testing. So we wanted to make sure that the people in each group were actually similar. They had things in common. They were collaborating with the same people. You know, they, like I said, they were more similar to each other than they were to people in other groups. So that was our version of pressure testing. We're just making sure that the groups made sense, that they were distinct, and that they worked for people.
That's awesome. And I think there's, I'm going to try to group, there's like 4 or 5 questions around this. There's like an open question about like, how did your previous research inform this current round, like this current iteration? Did you use any of those insights? And how long is this method, like start to end, like typically, if you were to estimate? Yeah.
It's definitely, we're talking about months, not weeks. Especially with all the qualitative work and the quantitative work and the analysis and all of that. So I would say we spent 8 or 9 months maybe on the project total, including all of the assets and all of that. And then I forgot your first part of the question.
How did you guys have done this method now at least twice? Did you use any of the previous kind of information to help inform this survey and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we did look at the questions from the previous survey and we thought about, are any of these relevant? Is this something that we also want to measure again this time? So we borrowed some of those questions. We also preserved the ability to recreate our original personas. So we kept the questions that created our first personas, and that allowed us to say, okay, how did the new ones map to the old ones? And that was really important for our stakeholders because our admin personas were very well loved. People really loved those personas and they were very attached to them. So we had to be able to say, this person is now this person and this is why, or this is why this person doesn't exist anymore. It's sprinkled among these other people. So it helped us kind of convey what's changed and how do you use it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just to hear kind of like knowing that your stakeholders like really care so much about them that you are like, okay, this is now how it translates in this iteration and stuff too. That's really cool that you guys were able to draw the connection. So there were some questions too about like the subset of people, the 6,000 who answered. Do you feel like they were a representative sample out of the, I know you sent it out to like almost 1 million people, but like were there any like biases that you might have seen and like how did you maybe control for that, or were you aware of that? And also because you've done this methodology before, like was there anything that you learned previously that you're now applying?
Yeah, so we worked with 8 different teams, and a big part of that was getting access to their distribution lists. to make sure we had the most representative sample possible. So we had a lot of internal collaboration to make that real. But we also had GDPR and all of the excitement around privacy that happened last summer as well, which meant that sending out a survey to that sample was very complicated, and it required a lot of time in figuring out how to do that in a way that's in line with all of our policies as well as these other international laws. So that was a big challenge for us. So we were very worried about representation on our sample. When we looked at who responded, we did feel like it was representative in a lot of ways, but we also know that they're probably more engaged people who completed our survey and perhaps more skilled than like our sample as a whole. So that was a limitation that we called out internally.
Is that something too that then, did you counterbalance that, or like, I don't know, do like a stratified sample or some kind of thing to be like, hey, like we know that X amount of our users are actually this, but they didn't really answer the survey, or any type of that? Or do these even map to percentages of like types of users too? If you can't answer that, that's okay.
No, so we called out, like I mentioned earlier, we called out that group of people that didn't fit super well into any of the other categories. So I think that kind of addresses the issue of, you know, of course, the people who are going to respond to the survey are going to be overly engaged or more engaged than others. But we do feel like we learned something from that group that emerged this time around, the emerging admins. So yeah, like I said, we thought of them as like a high potential group that maybe wasn't as engaged. So yeah, we did feel like we, you know, learned something from them and called them out.
On that topic of the outliers too, there's a couple of questions around like how difficult is it to find those outliers? Like when you're going through like PCA and stuff too, it can be hard to kind of like have semantic meaning to like those components.
Yeah.
Were they like, did they obviously stand out? Did you do like heuristics? Is that the mix of science and art that you were talking about
Exactly.
too?
Yeah, definitely. So the PCA gave us the descriptives that best correlated with each component, and then we looked at every participant and assigned them to whatever component or persona that they best fit the descriptives of. And so throughout that process, we were finding that there were about like 300-400 people who they fit into a certain group of characteristics okay, but not very well. Maybe they would do some of the things that define that group, but not all of them. Maybe they weren't super skilled, or you know, they were noticeably different than the other people in their persona. So like I said earlier, we didn't just want to throw them in with the groups where they kind of fit. We wanted to learn something from them. So that's how we addressed them.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's cool to hear too about how you were actively like, well, you might have known it from the previous study too, and like how you were then addressing it. Did you also use PCA with the last iteration as well, the previous one?
With
the one from 2016? The previous personas?
No, so those were broken out based on their skill level.
I see. Okay.
So we used the PCA because this was multidimensional.
Got it.
But from my understanding, that was one variable.
Awesome. And I think the last question that we're going to do, thank you, by the way, these questions are awesome. I hope I've done justice to like the 40 questions that I've come in. Maybe not that many, 20. But will you guys stick around after too if people have questions for you? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Cool. So one that has been favorited as well by some people is, could you tell us a little bit more about the Duarte storytelling methodology? What is that? Like you mentioned it very briefly, but like how did you use that?
Yeah, so there's a group, the Duarte, and they have a method for storytelling, and it's something that's worth checking out if you're interested. But in general, if you think about it, a good story has like highs and lows. There's a little drama there. So we thought about ways for when we're telling the story of personas, like how do we say, you know, we used to think this, but now we think this. So it's about adding some kind of intrigue, making it a little bit more memorable. There's lots of different storytelling kind of techniques out there. That was one we used, but yeah, there's lots of really cool stuff out there if you're interested in embedding that in some of your presentations.
That's awesome. That's a really cool technique that I'm totally going to pick up for the next time I have to present something. Okay, so the final question, I know that was like a lightning round of a bunch of questions, but I always love to ask like a final wrap-up question, something that we all can just take back to our teams tomorrow and be like, I'm so stoked. There's like this like really cool process or whatever. I think a lot of us in the room are also would identify as like mixed methods researchers or maybe UX researchers trying to use data. What like one piece of advice do you have to share with our audience that they could bring back to their team or things that you've learned throughout your entire process and stuff?
Go for it.
Yeah, so in terms of making these personas, I would just reiterate the art and science aspect that we keep talking about. So I obviously came from a stats background, so I really wanted to stick to what the data was telling us and assign people based on where they best fit. But I definitely, like Connie and I reconciled her having a better idea of our user base and our stakeholder management, that aspect of the project. We definitely had to reconcile those two parts of it, and I really think that's how effective personas are made. So yeah, I really like that we combined those two disciplines and we didn't use just one.
Yeah, so for us, we started with those existing personas, and like I said, some of them were really well loved, and it's tricky when you have this framework that you're starting from, and it's easy to accidentally recreate that same project. So I would say keep a really open mind, like spend time exploring, discovering, you know, ignoring everything you thought was true before, and really come at it as we're going to learn about our users, and if it's different, great, and if it's the same, that's awesome as well. So I think just keeping an open mind, especially when you're starting from an existing framework, is really important.
That is so, so cool. Thank you. I just want to thank both of you so much for your time and energy and effort. And I know that this has been a lot of time on top of your normal work to put together this presentation and share your knowledge with us. So from the bottom of our hearts, collective, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Can we give them a round of applause? Great job. Okay, final wrap up. Yes, it works. Just wanted to announce for the rest of us, the next MLUX event is actually going to be a happy hour headed up by Will. Thank you, Will. Where are you? Hi, thanks, Will. He's also taking photos tonight. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be on April 16th. Then in May, we are doing our first ever South Bay MLUX. Woo! How many of you came up from the South Bay? Any of you? No? Yeah, some of you. Okay, don't worry. We're going to come down to you. You're welcome. So it's going to be in collaboration with our friends over at ladies.ux. So keep an eye out. We will send out when those tickets will be posted. Again, you need an Eventbrite ticket in order to attend. Please don't just RSVP on Meetup. And then our next event after that is going to be back here in San Francisco at Amazon Music, which is where I work. So I'm very excited to finally share what I work on with all of you. So that's going to be on June 13th. But just mark your calendars now. Just wanted to say big shout out again. Thank you so much to Katie, to Lana, to Tuhina, and Connie, all of the volunteers from Salesforce too. Thank you so much to the MLUX volunteers who help check everyone in and make sure they have wristbands and take photos. But really, especially thank you to everyone in the audience. Thank you for showing up. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. I know a lot of us have families and stuff, and I just really appreciate your time, and I really hope that you get a chance to stick around and meet some other cool people. So thank you. We can still mingle, and there's a bunch of swag from Salesforce too if you guys want that too. It's out on the table. So yeah, thank you.